Hello. Thank you very much for inviting me. I'm Shigeo Kobayashi from Japan. I will give a talk under this title, Design Theory for Opening Up the Imperfective Aspect. Today's talk is developed based on a part of my new book, What is Technology Really?, which was published this September. The book consists of 5 chapters. In the final chapter, I introduce a project called Art for Wellbeing, which involves people with disabilities. I participated in the project as the general supervisor. One could call chapters 1 to 4 the theoretical part and chapter 5 the practical part. But it would not that theory existed first, then we practiced, nor that we extracted theory from practice. Instead, they were cultivated simultaneously. Chapters 1 and 2 are introductions to discussions in the field of philosophy of technology. Philosophy is a discipline that critically examines and deeply thinks about things we consider common sense. Within that, philosophy of technology deals with techniques and technology. In modern philosophy of technology, there are broadly two positions: technology with a capital T and technologies with a small t. Understanding the gap between these two perspectives is crucial for our discussion today. One of the most visible manifestations of the nature of advanced technologies in the modern era is the technologies and services known as generative AI. By using generative AI, we are becoming capable of generating text, images, videos, audio, etc., with such precision that they are indistinguishable from the real thing. Such technologies progress extremely fast, and it feels as if things are moving forward beyond our understanding or without our discussion catching up. Furthermore, such changes are often narrated as if they were inevitable. In such times, we might think that our options are limited to only two: either desperately trying to keep up so as not to fall behind, or giving up and becoming obsolete. In addition, in an era where technologies like generative AI are on the rise, there is also the problem that the tactile sense regarding making is being lost. If being conscious of the fact that we make things but also are made by them is the foundation of humans as Homo faber, human the maker, we could even consider that we are entering a situation where that might be shaken. Behind generative AI, there is a structure typical to technology. Let's look at that concretely. Kate Crawford, who researches AI and its material impacts, pointed out that the technology called AI is an extractive industry. For example, from the earth, underground resources such as rare metals and rare earths, like lithium required for batteries, as well as water, which is needed for cooling in data centers, are extracted. Also, from labor, people who are mobilized via crowdsourcing for dataset creation and operation at low wages are extracted. Furthermore, from that data, arbitrary maintenance and appropriation are carried out for the massive amounts of data required, especially in deep learning. Often, AI is depicted as a non material and disembodied technology, but its reality is entirely different. It goes far beyond being a mere means, as everything, including humans, is fully mobilized as resources. Here, being treated as a resource implies that our human dignity and agency are being stripped away. The reality pointed out by Crawford can be said to be precisely the concept of enframing that philosopher Martin Heidegger derived as the essence of technology originating in the modern West. The problem of enframing, as presented by Heidegger, was critically inherited and deepened thereafter. Let's refer to the discussion by Yuk Hoi, a philosopher from Hong Kong, who focuses on techniques and technology. In the preface to the Japanese edition of his book, The Question Concerning Technology in China, Hoy poses the following question. We ought to think about diverse cosmotechniques, not a single technology that begins with the myth of Prometheus and results in modern digital technology. If the concept of technology remains this narrow, the imagination for possible futures will be extremely limited. Hoy considers that every culture has its own cosmology. The cosmology Hoy refers to is not limited to purely scientific theories about cosmic space, like astrophysics. It is close to the unique worldview or view of nature held by each culture. He considers that cosmology is embedded in our daily lives, in the way we relate to other humans and non humans, or to natural resources and the environment as a whole. For example, the concept of ma, interval in Japanese architecture, could be said to be an example of a cosmology fundamentally different from Western spatial concepts. In contrast, the technologies observable in the here and now, such as the internet, PCs, smartphones, and AI, are a complex blend of techniques, science, and even capitalism. In the modern era, it seems as if this is the only way of being, but in fact, there should be diverse forms of techniques based on diverse cosmologies besides this. And the question is, how might we cultivate the imagination for those? To answer, to answer this question, we first need to increase the resolution of the world's techniques and technology. In the footnotes of the same book, Hoy organizes concepts regarding techniques and technology as follows. First, techniques refers to the general category of all forms of making and practice. Next, techne is a Greek concept of techniques, referring to what Heidegger understands as poiesis. Technology refers to a fundamental shift that occurred in modern Europe, developing into ever increasing automation, and as a result, led to what Heidegger calls enframing. In this way, Hoy organized concepts regarding techniques and pointed out the narrowness of the concept of technology. Like Heidegger and Hoy, the discussion that asks what technology is and argues about that problem is called technology with a capital T. However, the scale is significantly different from the individual technologies, and it is difficult to maintain a tangible sense of reality in discussions divorced from our experiences in the life world. Therefore, a shift toward a stance of precisely analyzing and describing the state of specific concrete technologies, known as the empirical term, occurred. The second stance is referred to as technologies with a small t. This position can be considered successful, particularly in terms of engineering. The method of limiting the scope to specific concrete technologies and discussing LC, ethical, legal, and social implications is a popular approach. However, no matter how much we gather such fragments, it does not lead to orienting technology towards the better. We tend to trapped by the specific mode of techniques originating in the modern West, technology with a capital T. If we continue to approach design based on the theories grounded in this technology, we will only end up reinforcing it further. Yet, abandoning technology entirely is practically impossible. How, then, might we regain our freedom, even if little by little, from this state of entrapment? Both of these positions in the philosophy of technology are important. Still, they have many incompatible parts, and although there are attempts to bridge them, it cannot be said that they are successful. Top down, bottom up, when neither alone works, how do we find a modus vivendi between them? When I considered whether there were any hints on how to approach the complicated problem of facing technology while retaining a tactile sense, I came across a discussion by philosopher and Bergson scholar Yasushi Hirai in Made Out of Time, an invitation to Bergson's philosophy of time. Hirai describes the difficulty and importance of rethinking time as follows. The concept of time different from I'm sorry, the concept of time is a concept built into the foundation of our thinking, the operating system level, so to speak. Accordingly, updating it takes effort and is troublesome, but if achieved, the impact it exerts is naturally large. I cannot say for certain I have fully updated my own OS of time, but it was an experience that brought about various shifts in perspective. While gaining many suggestions from this book, I was able to write my own. Since time is limited, I will introduce the key concept, the imperfective aspect. The imperfective aspect is one of the grammatical terms referred to as aspect. As a perspective on time, tense, the division into past, present, and future, is generally well known. Tense does not imply a continuity of homogeneous moments. Rather, it is a way of assigning qualitative difference to the present. Aspect is a perspective different from tense. I will introduce three representative ones. The perfective aspect refers to the whole event, ignoring the different phases or parts that make up an event. For example, I wrote this book. I brewed coffee this morning. I used text generative AI to write the report. The next one, the imperfective aspect, makes specific reference to the internal structure of situations by focusing on their ongoing development, but does not make reference to their terminative phases. For example, I am writing this book. I am brewing coffee right now. I am conversing with text generative AI to write the report. Furthermore, there is also the perfect aspect, which refers to times later than the situation and places emphasis on the resultant phrases or states of situations rather than on inceptive phases. For example, I have finished writing this book. I have already brewed coffee. I have been using text generative AI often to write reports. Okay, so this is not mere wordplay. It is a matter of fundamental attitude regarding how we grasp the object we design and the act of designing itself. Here, we can increase the resolution of time by incorporating aspect as a new axis. First, from a philosophical point of view, aspect greatly influences how we view the world. For example, there is a significant difference. The perfective aspect grasps the world as a set of determined beings, whereas the imperfective aspect grasps it as a process of becoming. Second, tense and aspect are not opposing concepts but stand in an orthogonal relationship, like cutting time vertically or horizontally. Therefore, there are 9 variations, 3 by 3 of past, present, future, and perfective, imperfective, perfect aspects. When we design something, we typically think about the future, but instead of discussing it vaguely, we can discuss it with higher resolution. Even within the same future, the perfective future grasps the object statically at a certain point in the future. It is often used when presenting a determined image of the future, typically in future predictions by governments or corporations, dramatizing it as a deterministic and inevitable change. In contrast, the imperfective future considers how the process of the object unfolds at a certain point in the future from the inside. For example, like the reading experience of science fiction works set in the future, one experiences what is unfolding in the world depicted in the world from our first person perspective. Furthermore, the perfect future considers the cumulative transformation that the object will likely have brought about in society by the time it reaches a certain point in the future. In this way, by introducing aspects, we become able to see it with higher resolution. By grasping the three aspects as a triad, we become able not only to present a determined image of the future, but also to consider the cumulative transformation that will likely have been brought about in society between the present and a certain point in the future, while considering from within how our life world is unfolding. The perfect, the perfect view is often adopted when thinking about social systems, and the perfect perspective of viewing from the outside is often considered objective. However, this outside perspective ends up being a view from nowhere that practically does not exist. We cannot escape from this world, or more precisely, from the here and now. Instead, it is essential to think from the perspective of experience as a first person account from within this world in a strictly continuous manner. Henri Bergson is considered the philosopher who deeply explored the concept of time through the lens of aspect. While he didn't use the term imperfective himself, modern interpretations position his philosophy as focusing precisely on this imperfective aspect. Let's read a text written by Bergson. Suppress the conscious and the living. You obtain, in fact, a universe whose successive states are, in theory, calculable in advance, like the images placed side by side along the cinematographic film prior to its unrolling. Why, then, the unrolling? Why is reality unfurling? Why is it not spread out? What good is time? This in days gone by was the starting point of my reflections. Time is what hinders everything from being given at once. It retards, or rather, it is retardation. It must therefore be elaboration. Would it not then be a vehicle of creation and of choice? Would not the existence of time prove that there is indetermination in things? Would not time be that indetermination itself? If everything were calculable in advance, the process of time unfolding would not be necessary. Yet time actually exists. Bergson points out that this is precisely where the room for creation lies. The key concept of Bergson's philosophy of time is duration. The concept of duration has four characteristics. First is a focus on the quality of time. We generally tend to think of time as if it were embedded in the world as a quantity, measured with clocks and similar devices. Instead, Bergson focused on lived time, which precedes measurement, quantification, and comparison. Time experienced by life in situations where things are perceived in the present progressive form. Second, he considered that the present encompasses both the immediate past and the immediate future and has thickness. Third, he argued that the moment does not succeed one another, like frames lined up on a movie film, where one moment disappears and another appears to replace it, but that the moment melts into the next moment and interpenetrates each other as a continuous thing. Fourth, he considered that time creates consciousness, not the other way around. Bergson focused on the sensory motor system of living beings. In organisms like humans, where the delay of the sensory motor system is considerable, the flow stagnates, diversifies, deviates, and delays, ultimately leading to a richer phenomenal consciousness. Bergson thought that consciousness is created by delay. These four characteristics define the concept of duration. We usually peek at the world through the present window. According to findings in modern psychology, the present window is on the scale of seconds, and we cannot directly perceive events on an extremely small time scale nor events on an extremely large time scale compared to this unit. For example, the temporal resolution of vision is approximately 20 milliseconds. That means approximately 50 frames per second. And we cannot perceive events in intervals shorter than this. Actually, fluorescent lights flicker 50 or 60 times per second, but no one can perceive that as flickering. Conversely, we also cannot perceive slow movement, such as the tropic movement of plants chasing the sun, or the apparent rotation of celestial bodies that takes approximately 24 hours. In this way, multiple time scales different from the present window are related to our human perception. There are even smaller scales. The vibration of red light occurs hundreds of trillions of times per second, and we cannot distinguish individual vibrations. According to Hirai, the time Bergson discussed can be organized into four layers: physical vibration, moment of sensation, sickness of the present, and the individual's life. He interprets that Bergson thought these times, with vastly different time scales, are stacked vertically, and quality or consciousness arises from the time scale gaps between layers. When neither bottom up nor top down alone can determine the result, and the emergence of a new and special temporal domain is required, what opens up is the imperfective aspect. The imperfective aspect is a collective term for temporal windows characterized by the grammatical imperfective aspect. The imperfective aspect opens when a person encounters something unknown. This is a key to designing an experience. Bergson further developed his theory of memory by proposing two distinct actions: pure memory and motor memory. Pure memory is unstructured memory before it is typified, such as the memory of the day one rode a bicycle for the first time, or an experience at a specific exhibition. In contrast, motor memory refers to habitual behavioral patterns ingrained in the body through repetition, such as riding a bicycle, walking, writing characters, or playing a musical instrument. Bergson emphasizes that once acquired, it becomes automated and conscious control becomes unnecessary as it steps outside of time. To understand Bergson's concept of motor memory more deeply, let's look at the landscape. The figure on the right is Waddington's epigenetic landscape model. Imagine a ball rolling down a hill, following deep, canalized valleys. These valleys represent our habits. Here, I want to emphasize the trade-off of this mechanism. Motor memory functions as a form of temporal outsourcing. It allows us to economize the imperfective aspect of duration. Without this efficiency, we couldn't survive daily life. We need these valleys to act smoothly. However, there is a cost. By automating our actions, we bypass the rich, conscious flow of time. We stop thinking, we stop feeling. We become mere automata following the valleys. This brings us a crucial point regarding the location of memory. Common sense tells us memory is in the brain, but Belson suggests memory is outsourced to the external environment. Think of animals making trails in the forest or building nests. They are physically shaping the environment to offload their cognitive burden. In this way, living organisms are constantly curving their own landscapes. This leads to my core argument regarding design in the age of AI. conventional engineering and AI strive for optimization. This is deepening these barriers, making our actions more automatic and efficient. But if we optimize everything, we lose the opportunity for consciousness to arise. We lose the richness of life. This is why we need a different design stance. We must intentionally design encounters with the unknown. It is not about controlling everything. It is about creating situations where the canalized automatic response fails, compelling the user to stop, think, and question their own values. Designing to open the imperfective aspect is the key to resisting excessive optimization and reclaiming our humanity. So far, discussions have been somewhat abstract regarding Bergson's philosophy of time and memory theory. Let's examine how these theoretical frameworks operate in real world situations using concrete examples from New Media Earth. What we examine here is the work Boundary Functions by Scott Snip in 1998. This work tracks participants' positions with a camera mounted on the ceiling, generates Voronoi diagrams based on each position, and projects them onto the floor surface. And the participants realize that personal space exists only in relation to others, and that as boundaries are visualized, it changes without being under anyone's control. And visualization of personal space, which usually follows unconsciously, induces metacognition while simultaneously providing a novel perceptual experience. On the left side of the figure, the four time scale layers explained earlier are shown, and on the right side, two landscapes, perceptual and mnemic, are shown. Both of these are acquired postnatally, and the landscape transforms over time. Typical behaviors become automated and can be executed without conscious effort. However, if optimization proceeds too much, it enters a state where consciousness no longer rises, and there is no freedom either. What happens in boundary functions? First, motor memory associated with physical actions, such as walking and standing still, is shared by many participants. This perceptual landscape facilitates a smooth introduction to the work. Subsequently, the work introduces a novel sensory experience, the visualization of personal space and boundaries with others through the use of Voronoi diagrams. This novel sensory experience deviates from the established perceptual landscape, the boundaries we usually follow unconsciously, thereby opening the perceptual imperfective. Then, to interpret this novel experience, consciousness accesses the mnemic landscape, invoking various memories in daily life regarding boundaries and interactions with others. However, merely triggering canalized memories is not enough to open the deeper temporal windows. As participants metacognitively recognize that they unconsciously follow these visualized boundaries, exploratory remembering beyond the habitual range becomes necessary. This deviation from performed recollective patterns disrupts habitual thought patterns and opens the mnemic imperfective. Through this work, participants realize something profound. The personal space we keep isn't just a personal preference, it is shaped by invisible norms that we follow unconsciously. But merely realizing this isn't the end. The experience drives us deeper. In boundary functions, as participants continue the experience together with others, they metacognitively recognize that one is sharing boundaries with others unconsciously. This deeper level of engagement pushes past temporary deviation and requires a crucial further step, activating a sustained transformation of one's pre existing landscapes. Therefore, this stage requires the sustained rewriting of both perceptual and mnemic landscapes to accommodate the profound new insight. We call the time during which such a fundamental rewriting of the landscape occurs as the existential imperfective. This is because it is a state where the very way of one's own existence, rooted in the deep structure of memory and personality, is questioned, going beyond the level of mere perception or episodic memory. This kind of sustained transformation is not limited to media art. The existential imperfective can open when an artwork compels a fundamental questioning of one's deeply ingrained social or ethical norms. For example, a work addressing themes like gender, race, or sexual minorities, disability, might profoundly destabilize the participants' habitual societal expectation. That means their mimic landscape. If the experience is so impactful that it requires the participants to fundamentally renew their long-standing thought patterns and biases, it can trigger the existential imperfective. Of course, whether the question that opens the existential imperfective sprouts or not depends or on the accumulation of that person's unique experiences and capacity for engagement. When the existential imperfective closes, this sustained transformation mainly rewrites the mimic landscape. Through such process, the experience is transformed from a temporary event into a sustained influence. This results in lasting configuration of the participant's personality, meaning the experience becomes something that is occasionally recalled in their subsequent daily lives, continuing to shape how they view the world going forward. This implies that our individual memory and personality are deeply connected to the broader structure of society, what we refer to as the societal landscape. While this landscape seems rigid, it is actually maintained by our collective actions. Therefore, such personal transformations, when accumulated, gradually reshape the societal landscape itself on the scale of decades. To foster such fundamental changes through our work, what kind of stance should we take as designers? To foster such fundamental changes through our work, I propose three specific attitudes for designers. First, let's read margins. The meaning of technology cannot be decided by the designer alone. It is essential to design thoughtfully and provide a high quality experience. But let's also maintain sufficient margins, even if it looks seemingly broken from the designer's perspective. It is not the designer who decides whether it is broken or not. Providing presets as a demonstration is effective, but keep them open to modification. Let's encourage starting from play. The designer's intention is not transmitted from a sender to receiver like a message from a transmitter to a receiver. Let's start from a phrase that looks like more mere fooling around at the first glance, and not restrict the possibility that meanings the designer never imagined might emerge while playing. And lastly, let's not create deterministic narratives. Let's stop fixing the meaning of a certain technology and narrating as if the changes brought about by that technology were inevitable. Since this world is being unfolded and has not been unfolded completely, we should always be able to intervene in it and cause new things to happen. By adopting these attitudes, we can move away from merely utilizing technology as passive recipients. Instead, let's become active participants who co-transform with it to weave diverse technodiversity. Let's open up the imperfective aspect together. Thank you very much for listening.